February 27th, Tuesday afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us here today. We're talking all about history, preservation, and then we're going to shake things up and talk a little bit about technology later on this afternoon and some gadgets you can get with a great deal. So I'd like to say hello and welcome to our first guest, Brent Runyon. He's the Executive Director of the Providence Preservation Society. Brent, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a couple of things to talk about today. We're going to talk about your recently released list of the 2018 most endangered properties here in Providence. We're going to talk about some stuff that's been going on, some interesting things, and then of course you have the very popular, very exciting Winter Bash that's coming up this weekend. I know a lot of people are looking forward to that. It's always a huge success. But let's start off talking about a couple things that have been going on with Brown University. A lot of excitement, a lot of feedback happening within the community. And something else that is pretty interesting, news came out that Brown University was looking at building a wellness dorm up near Brown University, obviously, 450 Brook Street. So wanted to get your thoughts on that. You had made some comments. Wanted just to get some insight from you on that.
Yeah, so when they went to do their master plan amendment in December, there were two major components. One, the Performing Arts Center, which I think we'll talk about.
Yeah.
The other being a wellness dorm, which I'm not really familiar with that concept. We didn't have it when I was in college, but I believe it will be placed on the parking lot on Brook Street, which they built a couple of years ago when they tore 7 houses down that were in bad shape. And so, you know, the community is looking forward to seeing what's going to replace that surface parking lot. So I think that will be coming up in March at the City Plan Commission hearing. So, you know, we just encourage people to look and watch that and see what they think and weigh in when they want to and be part of the process.
Okay. So again, a lot of focus and attention on these discussions has been on the Performing Arts Center, which there was a lot of community discussion about.
There was.
And recently, I believe it was just last week, that Brown kind of relaunched a plan, likely because there was so much community discussion on this. So let's talk a little bit about what happened. There were 5 buildings that were on the most endangered properties list as part of that proposed Performing Arts Center on College Hill. And again, Brown recently revised their proposal. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on the revised proposal.
We're very enthusiastic about the revised proposal. The new site actually is very close to the one they wanted originally. It's central to their campus, has proximities to other arts uses, but it doesn't require demolition of any historic buildings. It requires moving one, but to a very nearby location, so it preserves the context for the most part of that building. So we feel it's a real win-win for the community and for Brown. The site actually works better for them apparently too. So we're really enthusiastic that because of the community feedback that they got, they were willing to reconsider a site, and it seems that they found one that actually works in their favor. So a win-win all around.
What does this say to you in terms of community engagement, community discussion, community activism when it comes to preservation? How does this issue speak to you?
You know, I feel like as a preservationist, it's really taking part in democracy and showing up at public hearings. People typically only get involved when something's in their backyard, but really things throughout the community affect our lives in ways if we pass by it, if we shop near it, if we know people who live nearby. So it's every month there are innumerable meetings to go to that become part of the process in shaping the future and preserving the past of the city and the state. So we think it's really important for people to participate.
Okay, so continuing the discussion, what do you think comes next for part of this? Again, so no demolition is part of this next this next proposal, but one property could be moved.
One property will be moved. So the next thing is March 20th. City Plan Commission, and they'll present the amendment, and it may be approved. So then once that is, then they can start moving a house and preparing plans, preparing the site. The really important thing at this point is knowing what the design of the Performing Arts building will look like. It's a pretty long street frontage along Angel Street near the Granoff Center, and so we feel it's really important that that new design really addresses and engages the public that will be driving, bicycling, walking by every day, rather than turn the side to it. So the design is really critical, and they have an excellent architect out of New York. So we're optimistic that they can work through and achieve everything they want and what we all feel is best for the community.
Excellent. Let's transition as we work our way through preservation and
Okay.
continuing with the community, talking about some of these endangered properties lists. So
Right.
continuing to work it, I believe it's just over 15 on the list this year, right?
It keeps growing.
Yeah, it does keep growing, and some of these have continued to make the list. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It means they're still around, so
Right.
I
That's
suppose
true.
that's good.
That's true.
But also not a good thing because it means they are still endangered. So
Right.
let's kind of walk our way through these, just to give people kind of a reminder, a refresher. What classifies an endangered property?
Sure. So, it's basically a property that it could have an immediate danger, such as demolition, which the Brown 5 did until that was withdrawn recently. Or it could be something that's just a large building that has a very difficult use. And in Providence, we've had a lot of those over the years. But as we've seen, all these old mill buildings that didn't have a future in the 90s have now all been, for the most part, rehabilitated into one of several uses. So we believe that if we can keep a building up long enough and keep focus on it so the community knows it's there, they know it's important, that a new use will come along. For instance, I just heard that last night at the Historic District Commission, they announced a plan with the city owns that building, the Bohms Theater on Broad Street. The city owns that building, and apparently an owner from the community is coming forward to preserve the facade, which is amazing.
Awesome.
And to build something behind it for local events. So that's a building that no one really had any hope for, but thanks to the city and some other actors, it looks like it will have a new use.
That is excellent news.
Yeah.
Excellent news. I kind of got chills just there. Okay, so let's talk about one that we all know about that made the list this year. If you don't know about it, then I don't know where you've been. The Industrial Trust Building, also known as the Superman Building. There's been a lot of action on both sides. Kind of what do we do about this? Talk to me a little bit about thoughts on the Superman Building this year.
Well, we like to call it the Industrial Trust Building.
Yes.
However, it's obviously easier to say Superman. Everybody knows it by that name. That building, the state and city have been working to find commercial tenants for it. The owner had looked at residential use. But for whatever reason that we're not privy to, it's stalled. So we think that we need to find a solution in the next year to start attracting some tenants, start rehabbing the building. The limestone is not in great shape, so we're seeing some things crumbling off the building now. So we're really prioritizing that building this year. It's been on the list for a while, ever since it became vacant. So we're really looking forward to having some galvanizing community action and figuring out what to do with it.
Okay, so again,
Yeah.
a big priority
tough.
this year. It is tough. Such a staple within our community. So
Yeah, indelible part of the skyline.
it really is. Something that I thought was really interesting. The list, it really grabs you every year. There are so many fascinating properties that we have here in Providence.
Right.
But so when you take a look and you have pictures on the list, it's really interesting to look at it. So we're going to point out a couple to you.
Okay.
So the State House Lawn, 90 Smith Street, Capitol Center, downtown, and Smith Hill. The State House Lawn.
Yes, lawn. Well, it's not the first time it's been on.
Okay.
If you look at historic photographs of the lawn, the parking has been increasing every few decades or so. And so in 2014, I believe, the last time they expanded a parking lot, that's when we first started saying, look, that's enough. This is an important landscape. It's where the state gathers for important demonstrations, for meetings, for elections, things like that. And so this landscape deserves more attention. And then when they announced that they would be building an intermodal transit center there, our heads nearly exploded. However, we are working with RIDOT and the developer, who is actually the president of our board, who understands very well the concerns of the Preservation Society, to find a use that honors the landscape but also achieves the goals of the transit center and parking. So we are really optimistic that that plan will come through. It's all dependent on funding, as always.
Always.
But that's a hugely important landscape for the state of Rhode Island.
I think that's so valuable too, because if no one's really speaking up for the lawn at the State House, right? I mean, then it can just go away. And you're 100% right that so many people gather there and use that as a grounds to have very specific rallies and that kind of thing. So it's fascinating.
Absolutely. The state has so many things that they're thinking about every day, from children to seniors to driver's licenses. So it's really incumbent on those of us who are always paying attention to the environment, to buildings, to point these things out and try to get the state a little more focused on something they may have just let go because they've got bigger fish to fry, frankly.
Because they might just think it's grass.
They might. They absolutely might.
They might just think it's grass when there could be a little bit more. Okay, another one, the Water Supply Board Building, which is located at 52 Academy Avenue in Mount Pleasant.
Wow. Well, last year there was an announcement. I don't know if it was speculation or desire by LaSalle Academy to acquire that building and raise it to expand their parking lot. We never think that's a good idea unless the building is really too far gone. But we think since that building was just inhabited, it probably isn't. So we are hoping the city will do some sort of public process to engage people in deciding what the future of that building should be. Perhaps LaSalle can use it. Perhaps part of the building can be saved. We just think that some creative ideas need to come to the fore, and really there should be a public process for what is essentially a building owned by the public.
I think that's an excellent idea, rather than just pave over it. Okay, another one that I think is very interesting and curious to find out how and why it made the list. Parcel 1A, South Water Street, 195 Redevelopment District over on the east side.
Well, a lot of
195 land!
195 land. There are a few parcels there we're worried about, but people may think, well, that's not a historic landscape, right? It was created, actually that parcel was not created by the removal of 195. That was the helipad parcel. So it's been there for a while. But when it was deeded to 195 by the city for some reason, the state made very clear that there had to be certain restrictions on that property because of its historic uses, of the placement near the water. And really when you think about it, our shoreline, the river, the bay, those are really sacred places for Rhode Islanders. And so for us to allow something to be built right there that isn't really a public use, that may not be as attractive or whatever the public wants there, then we think that more scrutiny needs to be given. So for us to see a hotel going up that may not look so great, we have to really question that. What is the best use for that property? And so that's why we put it on the list. Not to say that nothing can be built there, but really to call attention to that. If you build something there, it needs to be really darn good.
I love that. And again, these are the kind of things that I think we should all be proud that someone's looking out for us.
Thank you.
Right?
Absolutely.
Looking out for it. There's a couple others out here. What are the ones you want to talk about?
I think that historic religious buildings are really tough.
There's quite a few on the list.
I think our city is not as religious as it used to be.
There's quite a few churches and synagogues on
there. So Broad Street Synagogue, which has got sort of a roof on it, needs a real roof. We need to find a new use. It's a valuable property for that neighborhood. A lot of good ideas have been put forward for how it could be used, but we really need to follow through on those. Our Lady of Mount Carmel on Atwells is a new one. I got a call from a developer a couple years ago or actually a real estate agent, and they said, is this one protected by anything? Because its highest and best use maybe as a developable lot. Oof. And I said, well, this is a beautiful building. How could we just say it should be knocked down and what could be put there? So we think that building could probably be reused. Let's talk about that before we talk about destroying it. So those are some of the ones that we're really interested in seeing brought back to life. They're hard to use, but not impossible.
Well, and I feel like there has been so much success over recent years in a lot of these New England towns, I'm just going to say, changing, whether it's mill buildings or churches or firehouses or schools, changing and developing them either into stores or restaurants or commercial properties or into places for people to live. It's fascinating how you can see the transition into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like I said earlier, sometimes you just have to keep a building up long enough to find a new use. And often that's the economy. There's a church on the east side that's turned into condos. I mean, on Atwells Avenue, you would think that people would pay pretty good money to live there or put a bar or restaurant in. They have a few of those over there, right?
Yeah.
So we think there are some uses for some of these buildings, and others it may just take a little more time.
And I think, too, it almost provides a talking point. So, I live in that place that used to be a church, or
Absolutely.
I live. Plus, how Rhode Island is that, right? I live in that place that used to be this.
Yeah.
We had a restaurant in here that it used to be a church or it used to be a bank, and then people filmed like movies in that. So I mean, it continues a talking point and helps with the economy too.
It does, and it's a unique place in Providence that has a history. A lot of people have gone there to school, church, had weddings. I mean, it's a place that means something to a lot of people. So things should stick around as long as possible. And by the way, we have plenty of land on which one can build in the city. 195, parking lots downtown. Capitol Center has some lots. There's plenty of land to build. So let's not tear anything else down.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, before we have you go and before we talk about the bash, let's talk about some success stories. You've been doing this list for a couple of years, endangered properties. Where have you seen some success?
Gosh, you put me on the spot. Let's see. We have had some successes, quite a few actually. The arcade, of course, is a good one. Very hard use, but Evan Granoff came up with really innovative use for that won a lot of national awards. Let's see, what else? Most everything downtown that was on the list has been saved, but things aren't coming to me at the moment.
Okay, so continuing the preservation.
But I will say the Welcome Arnold House on Planet Street, which is on our list. We have heard that the developer's architect is going to be submitting a plan for rehabilitation, so we hope to check that one off as saved this year. So we're really proud of that developer for coming forward with a new idea.
Awesome. Yeah. So you'll keep us in the loop?
Absolutely.
Okay, keep us in the loop on that. So because it's always about money, right?
It takes money to do this work.
On either side of it, right? It's always about the money. So there is a big fundraiser. The Providence Preservation Winter Bash is coming up. Has won numerous awards because people always love celebrating and always love pitching into preservation. Talk to us a little bit about what's happening this year.
Sure. Well, it's our 15th year doing that event. And speaking of endangered properties, we started that when we had a lot of big empty mill buildings. And this was a way to call attention to them. We have big parties in them. Makes sense. It's a little difficult these days because we're running out of big empty buildings. Well, not all of them, obviously.
Not all of them.
So it's our 15th year. We expect around 500 people to come and just enjoy a lot of really special bites, special cocktails, food from some of our really great restaurants in the area, and also a really good band and DJ and some special performances. So I think with the speakeasy theme, really celebrating a building from that era in a state that was last to even consider ratifying the amendment that created Prohibition, we think that the theme speaks really well to the history of Rhode Island and our special historic places.
It's a really fun party. If you haven't been, you should definitely go. It's worth it. So the Winter Bash Glitz and Glamour Speakeasy Affair, it's coming up this weekend, so tickets still available?
Tickets are still available. Okay. Early bird pricing ends Thursday night, and then they go up by $10 at the door. So really encourage you to get your tickets early for the best deal. We still have VIP tickets available.
Worth it.
And that gets you bottomless bubbles and special bites throughout the evening and special seating as well. Our host sponsor, Alex and Ani, has been great this year in helping us really promote the event. But we have a lot of great sponsors, and we think if everyone comes and wears their best flapper attire, gangster attire, whatever 1920s attire speaks to them, that everybody will have a fantastic time. We always do.
Oh, it's such a fun party. Well, Brent, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for filling us in on some of these properties. We'll, of course, have a link to your website and more information on the bash on our website, GoLocalProv.com. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's always wonderful to hear what's happening in the world of preservation. We're just going to take a quick break to get set up here for our next guest on Go Local Live. I'm Molly O'Brien. Thanks so much for joining us, and we're just going to take a quick pause.